my next conversation is lined up, and I apologize to him for getting carried away in that manner. Actually, I dropped my pages. Let me find them. I can't see them. All right. Yes, I'm right here. So my next conversation is going to be with Gossy Ukanwoke. So now I know Gossy, and I just call him Gossy, and I want to learn to pronounce his surname properly because I'm a Bush Yoruba woman. That's where we're going to start from when he comes on. He's the managing director of BetKing Nigeria, and is an entrepreneur and founder of Beni American Online Learning. I mean, that's what I know Gossy for. Hi, Gossy.
Hi, Funmi. How are you today?
Good, good. Start. How shall I pronounce your surname properly?
Ukanwoke.
Ukanwoke. What does it mean?
To be honest, I don't know. I've tried to find the answer to that question, and I get different answers depending on who I'm asking. So I've given up on it.
You've given up on it. Okay. When you know the one you like, let me know.
I definitely will.
Did you watch the conversations with E and then with Jerry? Because
yes,
I planned them to dovetail one after the other, really.
And I saw Jerry's. I don't know how we're going to do my own interview after his own. So
the first thing I want to ask is, I don't know how we're going to make sure that we get the likes of Jerry into the school system. How we're going to change the school system so we don't lose the likes of Jerry.
Yeah, it's incredible that to see someone young have the vision and have the tenacity to actually go at it, even when you don't have all that support from around. What that really means is if you give him the best support, he can basically do anything. So it's just let's see how we can support him as much as possible.
So Gossy, you are an education entrepreneur and innovator. I remember a few years ago when we started, and you were telling me this really utterly fascinating story about the numbers of students who cannot get into university, and solving it by talking about online education. I mean, let me start from COVID. What did you think? Well, I mean, did COVID validate you in a way?
Yes, COVID actually did validate the idea that we've been talking about for at least 8 years now in Nigeria, that it's time for us to fully embrace e-learning, digital learning, and the use of technology as the primary medium for learning. Now, whether we have accepted that reality is a completely different conversation, but at least it's pretty much obvious that technology is really needed in our classrooms to ensure, in this case of COVID, continuity. Because what has happened now is students have lost at least 3 months of learning because they're home and they're not, in many cases, they're not learning. So if students who started in the same time with people in other countries, our own students have lost 3 months. So 3 months gone because we haven't fully embraced the use of technology in the classroom.
I mean, even during COVID, there was the issue of, inequality gap, because there were certain, particularly at primary and secondary level, children of more affluence, middle class and upper middle class children could do online schooling. But the majority of children in Nigeria, millions and millions of children who depend on public education, could not access that, further widening the gap in knowledge. So that's the Achilles heel, people say, of online learning, that at the end of the day, first and foremost, is about access to internet and good quality internet. What are your thoughts as regards that?
See, the government has to do the job of the government. The government has to make provision for the people who can't provide for themselves. That's why we have a government. So internet is really needed. Devices are needed. But we've also seen a lot of progress over the last 5 to 10 years where the cost of devices has greatly reduced and penetration of internet has increased, and cost of internet access might not have reduced so much, but more people can afford to use the internet. But the government has to do what the government is supposed to do, especially for the larger population of people who can't afford access to technology on their own. There are so many models that are possible. The government can easily go to MTN and Airtel and Nine Mobile and say zero rate access to these learning platforms. So once people go to these platforms from your network, they don't pay any money. and you're able, and the government can subsidize whether it's tax breaks, because let's not, maybe there's no cash to pay, but you can give them some tax rebates in exchange for zero rating, access to these learning platforms. So if the government has access and has platforms that they have already provided proper content, quality content on for learners to go to, you can zero rate it. In that way, you don't need people to start paying for data. Between MTN, Airtel, and Glo, you have coverage in at least 90% of the country. The connection might not be the best in the rural areas, but you can also design for those areas. You can design for those areas where it's not heavy content. We've had situations where, in our own case, that we've used thumb drives, where we distributed thumb drives, where all the content was on thumb drives, and people could plug the thumb drive into their laptops or their phones or their tablets, and they stream the content on it. So they don't need internet access to stream their content. So the government has to really do the work for the masses. That's just the reality, and it goes across multiple industries, from healthcare to education to just about anything that has a social layer to it.
Right. I mean, being that, especially considering that education and health are quite central to everything else. I'm going to go to the issue of ASU saying, because recently ASU did say that, I mean, online learning is just not going to take off, it's not going to work, and so on and so forth. Do you think the resistance is about the challenges or a mentality thing?
They have provided the answer as well. They said e-learning will not work in Nigeria because we are not trained to deliver the learning. So it's not for any other reason. It's simply for the reason that people are unwilling to learn. They're unwilling to go through refresher courses. They're unwilling to become relevant in a way. The reason why I say it this way is we've worked in the past with Ahmadu Bello University and Obafemi Awolowo University, OAU and ABU, to take their on-campus programs online. In doing that, the very first thing that we did was to train the lecturers in class. So the people who were teaching in class, the first thing we did was train them. So then the training was consistent throughout the semester. So they were getting training at the same time that they were teaching online. Before the program started, they were trained on how to teach online. They were trained on how to use digital tools. They were trained on how to use technology to teach, because they were willing to learn, and they were also compensated for it. So it's not like they just teach online and that's it. Where I'm seeing the bigger group of ASU coming from is that, one, there's a fear of losing control. Second, there's an unwillingness to learn. There's an unwillingness to learn and to lose the control. So there's this belief that when your students are not in class, when you can't see them, you're not in control of things. The third one is there's also the fear of losing their jobs, because they feel like, if e-learning starts and we're having teachers from around the world teaching, then students might prefer them. When the question should be, why will they prefer other people than you? And if you can find the answer to that question, then you go fix up, right? So you can learn from anywhere in the world because you're looking for the best teachers. So if I want students to learn from me, I'll become the best at what I do, so that people can come looking for me. They're not willing to do the hard work, and it's the sad reality.
So those concerns, I've learned not to ignore people's fears, especially on a policy level. So those concerns, are they not concerns that clever regulation can allay? And that's not regulation that restricts the opportunities, but one that enforces training and opportunities for training so that they can upscale on one hand, and then of course also regulate the numbers of external tutoring or lecturing that can come. Because I mean, I've lived in other parts of the country. I see how they do clever regulation to sort of like position their people without losing the opportunities from other parts of the world. Is this also not a conversation about what sort of clever regulations are needed to take on these new ideas, new solutions to a big problem, really?
So I'll break your heart a little bit. The same people who are making the regulation are the same people who are saying that e-learning shouldn't work. So
Oh.
yes, so our professors take their sabbaticals at the Universities Commission, and that's where the policy is drawn up. So if you're not willing, you're not willing. And the willingness has to be the first step. You have to be willing to learn, because because it's a union, you can't force a union to do anything. They still haven't forced them to sign up to the payroll system that the federal government wanted them to get on. They haven't been able to force them to get on that payroll system. So you're not going to force them to go take classes or take trainings in order to start teaching online. So the willingness has to come first. But having a way of bridging that gap where you can find the willing people and the private sector now comes in, which is similar to what we did, was the private sector saw an opportunity that there were willing people within the public system who wanted to do better, and we decided to work with them. So we provided the technology, we provided the training, we provided the digitization, and almost every other thing that they needed, and they came with the knowledge and the teaching and the resources and the license, and we've been delivering that education to over 5,000, 6,000 people who are getting their degrees from those two universities. So it's around finding the blend between the people who are willing, and you provide them the platform to make use of that willingness. Because the people we work with at ABU, as an example, and OAU, are also ASU members. And their chapters within the university are not happy with them because they feel like, well, because ASU doesn't affect online learning, because all the content has been pre-recorded, is put on a learning platform. So even if you're on strike, strike doesn't stop students from logging into a learning platform and going to their classes. And then the e-tutors who are like signed on every single day, providing the day-to-day teaching, they're not employees of the university, so they're not members of ASU. So the strike doesn't affect e-learning. So that's part of the control, because the strike doesn't affect e-learning. You can't say we are shutting down the classes. You can't shut down the internet. You can't say, oh, we are shutting down classes. Students cannot go online and learn. The videos are there. The text is there. Everything is there. The only thing you can stop is maybe their physical examinations, but the learning has already happened. And
yeah,
so it's
but it
about
seems
finding
to
the
me
people who are
that
willing and
it
giving them
seems
the
to me that
technology.
it seems to me though that they are fighting a battle that will be lost.
It will be lost. It will be lost because the gap between the people looking to go to school and the available spaces for them is widening every year. And as it's widening every year, there is more demand for people. And like I was saying earlier today, there are some things that are certain. One is people have to eat every morning and every day, rather. People have to put clothes on their body. People have to live under a roof, and people have to get an education. Those are like some of the things that are like almost super certain. As people are growing, part of the growth is that you go from one level of education to the next. Part of growing is that you go through primary education, secondary education, tertiary education. People will have to find that education somewhere, and that's the thing. So if you don't provide the opportunities for them locally, we'll go to other places. We have the most students in other African countries. We go to the most random African countries to get that education. So in the scope of loss in revenue for the country, in the scope of loss in talent, we are losing consistently because we have refused to provide that opportunity locally. So only a matter of time, the market forces will win because demand and supply will have to balance out somehow. And as the world is becoming completely different and there's a drive of nationalism around the world, less visas are going to be issued. So less people are going to be able to leave. The other one is the world is no longer as safe as it used to be. People are going to travel a little less with COVID. Most people will not be so willing to get on a plane and travel anymore. And Naira is depreciating really bad. A school that is $70,000 or $20,000 will always remain $20,000. But $20,000 has gone from being 3 million naira to 6 million naira. Now it's 8 million naira. So, and naira, we make the money in naira, and you're going to convert that money to dollars to pay your kids' tuition. It's going to become really difficult for people to live, in the nearest future. When that time comes, we'll all be here, and and the system will have to cave in, and that's just the reality. The system will cave in
So
at
in a
some
way,
point.
do you share? So in a way, do you share some sort of optimism or some sort of belief
Mm-hmm.
that this COVID, in a way, is going to force changes that are necessary, painful, but
Yeah.
necessary? That's on one hand. On the
Mm-hmm.
other hand, I'm also asking the question, if we go back to the conversation earlier before this, I have a friend who is an education theorist um, in the UK. And he
Mm-hmm.
said 5 years ago that the
Mm-hmm.
education system that was developed for the industrial era, I mean,
Yeah.
post-industrial era, and is not going to work, especially now when a lot of it is focused on services. We have
Mm-hmm.
seen now that we are going to be stripped down to the bare brass tacks. So that's manufacturing, that's making things, that's the
Mm-hmm.
technicians, that's the people who will do less class work stuff. So how do we then train these people to match the realities that post-COVID will force upon us? So two-pronged questions, really. A, do you see now that do you share that optimism that COVID is going to force the changes that are necessary because of some of the things you've described? And two, do you see a change in the kind of education that will be necessary going forward? And how do we fill that gap?
Okay, so yes, COVID is going to change how we do education going forward. In the case of Nigeria, it might not be immediate. In other places, I'll use Ghana as an example. The government in Ghana has said public institutions should go figure out how to have digital platforms ASAP. So they want to quickly adjust immediately. In the case of Nigeria, it's not immediate because we've not made any significant changes around policy, but it's going to catch up because it goes beyond um, us going digital, but it also goes to when we have more people who are unable to leave because the system has functioned so far because we have just about enough people who leave the country to go get the education outside that we don't really see a lot more people just sitting down at home who are taking jam and they cannot get it. That's one side. So eventually the number is going to build up enough to the point where we have to do something. And it goes into your second question. We have been so obsessed with university education that no one is really speaking about the vocational side of things. With the way things are changing, conversations will now double down on what people are able to do rather than what certificates they have. And when you look at your immediate environment, you see so many things that technical or vocational education can help solve. So from the fact that you need a painter to the fact that you need a plumber, you need an electrician, you need people, you need cooks, you need drivers, you need security guards. There's so many things you need. And all of those things require good education. And the reason why we have subpar almost everything is because we don't have good education to that granular level. So as COVID has now changed, it's beginning to change our way of living and the way the world is going to be and Nigeria is going to be in the nearest future. Innovation is going to come into the point where we have to get really serious on how we train people for all the different things that matter to us.
Right.
And that's my optimism that it's going to push us to the point of beginning to train people for all the things that matter to us.
Right.
Hopefully,
And
it won't be so bad with people losing their lives. But if it gets so bad, people will also realize that they don't really need to go out. Who knew that there'll be a day that people will be so willing to go to church online? That
yeah,
going to church online is something that people are looking forward to because it's so huge that people want to go congregate. Because congregating necessarily means, for most people, will mean being in person. But now that has changed. People are more willing to go to church online and be part of their religious activities digitally. It's going to happen in every other thing.
some people have also argued that online learning can help in unexpected areas. For example, with things like sex for grades, that because there's less physical interactions and everything, the school curriculum and the grading and all of that is so open, it becomes harder to sexually assault, victimize, or harass female and sometimes male students, because there are boys raped by their lecturers too.
Mm-hmm.
So is this just pipe dream, or is that actually what's going on?
It's two-pronged, right? The two prongs is that the physical abuse will definitely reduce, but there's also digital perversion. So, but the good part of that is that there will be evidence of it. You cannot have digital perversion and there is no evidence because, God forbid, your lecturers will say do something on a screen. But definitely there will be much more evidence. Conversations will be the evidence of conversations will be there. But the better side of it is that merit will become something that is a lot more in front of things. Because in many situations, 80% of your assessment in general e-learning digital education is computer marked assessment. So the computer has already marked your assessments. You don't need an interaction with the teacher to mark your assessments. You still have the teacher marked assessments like your essays, and the questions are like sentences. But when you're doing things like multiple choice, filling the blank spaces, yes or no, true or false, the computer has already marked that. So the sex for grades will greatly drop. But there could also be potential, and that's something to keep in mind for people who are beginning to deliver learning online, and digitally, is that there's also room for abuse online. People already go through abuse online. That's a possibility for that. But if you design for it from the beginning, you're able to curtail it as early as possible before it becomes norm and before it becomes something that it's so deep that you can't control it. Because for online, it will blow up really fast. But the good thing is that there is always a record when it's digital. So if you want to take up a case, if you want to present, there's no hearsay in this one because it will be pretty clear that there were conversations that were had because the conversations will be there.
All right. I mean, obviously, tech has both a gender and age barrier, or apparent. And going forward, part of sort of like taking everybody along would be, because necessarily the people who had access and more used to tech, being that it's a relatively new reality for the world, are younger people. For example, all these conversations this evening, all of you guys, none of you are even 30 years, you're babies, and yes, that's been ages, I know, so none of you are 30 yet, but then there are also lots and lots of people who are left behind. Will that education be part of the education be a way to bring older generation of people into a closer understanding of tech and how it works? And there's also been a lot of conversation about tech leaving girls behind.
Okay. So I think now I realize I'm actually also getting old. So I'm actually way above 30 now.
Since when?
Since many years now. So, but I guess digital keeps us young and keeps us young at heart and all of that. I actually see it differently from the realities of the programs that we've had. Like the most successful bachelor program that I've been involved in delivered online is actually a nursing program that had 99% female in class. And these females were people who were trying to get their bachelor in nursing sciences, their BNS, and they were registered nurses already. But when you're a registered nurse, you can't leave your job to go to a campus and be locked in for 4 years. But if you also don't have a BNS, you can't go past level 8 in the nursing and midwifery council levels. So it was so popular with these nurses, and they were like 99% female. They were able to keep their jobs. They were going to their jobs every day, and they would take their classes any time of the day because they had tablets and they could stream their content. So I don't think tech in education really excludes women. I believe it actually includes women because it's even a much more safer place, and there is a lot more choices. So there are choices and it's almost tailored and designed for how you want to use it to use your learning. We realized that there are people who wanted to learn by watching videos, there are people who wanted to learn by reading text, there are people who wanted to learn by listening to audio. So we have all the content in multimedia format. So whatever works for you, you use it. But I believe it actually includes women more. And overall in our programs, we are around give or take 40% women and 60% men. But for a few programs, it's like 99% women. And also to say, like, some of our best students are also female, right? So because learning online requires a level of discipline, it requires a level of paying attention, it requires a level of planning and structuring out yourself and managing multiple things at the same time. And we've realized that many of our female students are really good at that, because you have to really structure out a time of day for your learning. You have to be able to log in every day and go through your classes and go through your resources. It might not sound like something that is that difficult, but it is really difficult. So I actually see more inclusion than exclusion for women.
Right. All right. Well, I've run out of time for the conversation, and so I'm going to say thank you. But before then, I wanted to ask, because I haven't seen you in a while, and then I saw something about Bet's company, and like, you got bored already with education. You're moving on.
It's not moving on. We are investing in other places to have enough money to invest in education.
And what is betting? Is it betting or bets?
It's
I know about the boats and the bets. It's so far. It's far.
It's so yeah. So BetKing, BetKing. At the end of it, I've also learned something in doing education, is that people, it's such in fights. We fight people to get an education by force, and you're fighting and fighting and fighting, and you're spending your money and spending and spending and spending. But you also realize that there are industries where people want it, and first and foremost, I'm a business person, and I'm an investor in things and in people and in businesses. I'll invest in things for multiple reasons, and realize that sports betting is something Nigerians really want. But let's create an environment where it's responsible. Let's invest in the communities. Like during this COVID, we had given over 100 million naira to people, right? I wouldn't do that in education. I don't have 100 million naira in education to donate to the general public, but I could do that in sports betting, because there is an opportunity for us to do that. And if we decide to bring out 1% or 2% of our profits every year and put it into a foundation, that is a considerable amount of money that we can invest in things that matter, like education and health, etc. It takes someone perhaps coming from my background in education and doing socially focused businesses in the past to get into something that is super cash heavy, super high volume, to also realize that there's a way to use those this new sector and new business to invest in the things that actually really matter to me personally.
You know what one mentor of mine said many years ago?
Please tell me.
That love without power can be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot give people love without the power to help them.
Exactly.
So I totally get you. I was pulling your string. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gossy. I know that the time is out. I wanted to mention, because I didn't want the conversation to go in that direction, but you yourself came from a background where you basically pulled yourself up from nowhere. I don't know if you tell that story publicly, but I found it inspiring when you told me that you came from a village in the eastern part of Nigeria yourself, and you basically made it happen.
Yes, and for me, it's like the power of education and getting a really good education, right? So, and that's why my focus is in giving people as good education as I had received. And if I give enough people a good education as I have received, and hoping that it will do for them what it has done for me, then we can have a lot more people who are socially conscious around investing in other people and helping everybody else get to the dreams and visions that they have for themselves.
All right. Well, thank you, Gossy.
You're most welcome.
I'll see you again soon. And now
We
I
shall
know
see
you're
soon.
as young as I imagined that you were. I won't be happy you like that anymore.
We will manage whatever is left of the hype.
Take good care of you. Bye.
Okay, you too. Have a good evening.